So I think there are two challenges, or maybe the biggest issues right now, that the Supreme Court Commission is working on. Number one is just education and training, generally speaking. So we publish a lot of material, video, content, educating the public as well as attorneys and judges, professionals about guardianships and conservatorships. There's more of that needs to be done, especially training for individuals who are serving as a guardian. So if you're appointed as a guardian for someone else, you're making their individual life decisions. If you're appointed as conservator for someone else, then you're put in the role of managing their money and property and finances and reporting to the court and all those things. I think there's a great need for training for especially family members who are serving as guardian or conservator for their incapacitated relative. The other big issue in Alabama is the lack of a guardian or conservator in some situations. So there are cases where someone is incapacitated and they need a guardian or conservator. However, there are no family members available or willing or qualified to be appointed as guardian or conservator. And there's not a public guardianship system in Alabama either. So those cases tend to fall through the cracks a little bit because the person needs a guardian, but there's no one to appoint as the guardian. And every county in Alabama handles this a little bit differently. Sometimes the judge will appoint a local attorney to serve as the guardian. In some cases, there's what's called a county conservator, but it's a little bit hit and miss, and there are just not enough services out there. There are volunteer guardian programs that could be utilized. There are different types of community guardian programs where individuals could be trained to serve as guardian when there's no one else available to serve as the guardian. In Alabama, the county sheriff is the what's called the guardian of last resort, where the county sheriff can serve as the conservator over the adult's estate or serve as their guardian when there's no one else to serve. And quite frankly, that's not a great system to have. We need professionally trained and available individuals who can serve as guardian or conservator. There are a lot of resources out there when you think about who to contact for help. So there's a couple of them, I think, on the sort of disability front. So working with individuals who have a disability, there's ADAP, the Alabama Disability Advocacy Program. They also provide some advocacy and legal services in some types of cases. So ADAP is one that I would recommend. Another agency that's regional in Alabama are called the Area Agencies on Aging. So they provide a lot of caregiver support, services for adults, as well as for those who have disabilities. And those are fairly easy to find. They're under the state of Alabama Department of Senior Services. And you could go to their website and you could actually see on a county by county basis the Area Agency on Aging that provides a lot of services locally. But it's not just also for aging, but they do provide services for disabled adults as well. So those would be two that I would highly recommend as guardianship or conservatorship for that matter should always be a last resort option. The reason for that is if you become incapacitated and someone goes to petition to become your legal guardian or your conservator, what results is you lose your rights, even up to the right to vote. So it's a transfer of rights from one person to someone else. So the adult who's been determined incapacitated legally, they lose the ability to make their own decisions. So, and their rights and decision making is then in the hands of someone else. So you don't want that to happen. No one wants to give up their rights and decision making ability. So less restrictive alternatives are ways that you can plan. So I could do, for example, one of the less restrictive alternatives I've talked about a little bit is a power of attorney or a healthcare directive. So those would be less restrictive alternatives where I can appoint an agent to make my decisions for me medically or my healthcare decisions if I'm not able to make those any longer. And I can avoid that interference with my decision making rights by appointing someone who I trust and voluntarily choose to do that. A power of attorney for finances is another type of less restrictive alternative. And those are estate planning documents that anybody can do to avoid a guardianship or conservatorship. There are also other types of less restrictive alternatives. The newest one is called a supported decision-making agreement, where the adult actually doesn't really even delegate authority to anybody else, but they just name supporters to help them make decisions, and they maintain in the driver's seat, making their own decisions with the help of their supporters. So that's a type or example of a less restrictive alternative that can be used and avoid a guardianship. There are other less restrictive alternatives. Even if a guardianship is applied for, then the court can limit the authority of the guardian and just tailor the guardianship to what the person's actual needs are and their abilities. So there's a thing in Alabama called a limited guardianship, and it would remove only the rights and decision making where the person is not able to make those decisions for themselves, but then also they preserve the ability to make other decisions. So there's a way to kind of split that up with a limited guardianship. There's a similar tool in a conservatorship where someone can petition to be appointed as what's called a special conservator, and they just do one thing. So maybe there's just one sort of financial transaction, maybe the sale of some property, for example, and the conservator can be authorized to do that one thing and be done. And it's not a complete permanent conservatorship in those cases. It's more like a temporary conservatorship.